I was once profoundly involved in witchcraft. I resided in shadows, serving entities that promised me dominion, but in truth, they held me captive. During that period, I could discern witches with ease because I was one of them. Today, as someone who has left that life, I intend to reveal 5 distinctive signs that invariably mark a witch. Pay close attention because the 4th one will undoubtedly surprise you. Before I commence, allow me to state this clearly. Witches seldom resemble the figures in films or stories. They do not stroll about in long black cloaks with elongated fingernails, reciting incantations publicly. On the contrary, the most dangerous witches appear utterly commonplace. They might be the individual sitting beside you in a place of worship, the neighbor whose smile is ever present, perhaps even an educator or someone selling provisions at the marketplace. When I was still actively practicing, I encountered a young woman named Anita at a spiritual gathering in Port Harcourt. Physically, she seemed faultless, soft-spoken, and respectful. If you met her, you would never remotely suspect her to be a witch. However, she had already sacrificed 2 members of her own family to ascend the ranks within her order. The startling reality is this: witches conceal themselves in plain view, and the only means to identify them is by recognizing their spiritual characteristics. The first distinctive sign relates to the eyes that convey without utterance. When a witch gazes upon you, it is not a casual look. Their eyes bear a certain weightiness. I recall in the coven we were taught that our eyes function as portals. A force can lock eyes with you and instill fright, failure, or bewilderment without even uttering a syllable. This is why in the book of Proverbs chapter 6 verse 25, the scripture admonishes, "Do not desire her beauty in your heart, nor let her capture you with her eyes." I once was acquainted with a woman named Grace. She operated a modest supply store in Enugu. Every male who crossed her path eventually ended up abandoning his spouse or having his livelihood ruined. How? Her eyes. They possessed a magnetic power that spiritually bound people without their awareness. I used to envy her because she rarely spoke much. Yet, men were fiercely devoted to her. What they failed to grasp was that every gaze was a snare, dragging them into spiritual confinement. In another situation, at a secondary school, a female student utilized her eyes to initiate her peers. She would fix her stare on them during lessons, and later they would begin seeing her in their nightly visions. That illustrates the immense power the eyes can possess in the realm of witchcraft. The next sign is a dual existence. Witches frequently maintain 2 distinct lives. In the tangible world, they seem compassionate, amiable, and normal. Yet in the spiritual domain, they are entirely different beings. I remember how I would offer smiles to people during the day, but by nightfall, I would afflict those same individuals in their dreams. That facade of sweetness is a disguise. They might be your closest confidant, perhaps even a relative, but they simultaneously inhabit 2 realms. There was a gentleman I knew in Lagos, a prosperous entrepreneur by day. He was a philanthropist, funding scholarships, making contributions at church, and even covering medical expenses for others. But after dark, he was a sovereign in the marine kingdom, draining the very destinies of the individuals he seemingly aided. He would bestow a blessing with one hand, but in the spiritual realm, he would shackle you with the other. This explains why so many people are perplexed when they discover that an ostensibly good person was involved in occult practices. The fact is, witches are masters of deception. They will perform the role that best conceals their genuine nature. Another sign is an extraordinary aura surrounding them. Everywhere a witch goes, they project an atmosphere. Some radiate a sense of oppression, while others possess a peculiar charm that draws people in irresistibly. In my period of darkness, I was trained to exude an aura that caused people to either admire me unquestioningly or fear me without understanding the reason. This is why the epistle to the Ephesians reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. I will share an illustration. There was a student named Blessing at Unilag. She was not the most aesthetically pleasing student in her cohort, yet every professor favored her, every man desired her, and even other women felt magnetically attracted to her. That was not mere physical appeal. She carried an atmosphere, a spiritual fragrance that rendered her captivating. I once inquired what she used, and she simply chuckled, saying, "You already know." She had traded in blood sacrifices that furnished her with that specific radiance. Conversely, I also knew witches who emitted profound heaviness. The moment they entered a space, tranquility evaporated, disputes would erupt. People would experience sudden fatigue or melancholy for no discernible reason. That is another method to perceive their presence. The spiritual environment shifts when they make an appearance. This next characteristic is truly astonishing: unconventional affinity with fauna. One detail many people overlook is that witches share an unusual connection with specific fauna. Felines, owls, canines, serpents, these creatures become spiritual conduits. During my involvement in witchcraft, I possessed a sable cat that was far beyond a mere companion. It was a spiritual associate utilized for astral projection. Sometimes, witches will saturate these creatures with blood offerings or employ them as vessels for spiritual aggression. Many fail to realize that what seems like an innocuous pet could actually be a spiritual implement. Allow me to recount an anecdote. There was an elderly woman in my village in Imo State. People believed she simply had a fondness for goats because she consistently kept a large number of them. But by night, some of those goats were not truly caprines. They were spiritual entities. Whenever she departed her body to attend clandestine gatherings, one of those goats would become ill and perish as an exchange. No one suspected her because during daylight hours, she was an unassuming grandmother. Another instance, in Ghana, I encountered a witch who never traveled using her physical form. She projected through an owl that resided in a tree near her dwelling. That owl was not just a winged creature, it was her chariot. If that bird were ever destroyed, she would die instantly. This highlights why not all animals in the vicinity of witches are ordinary. The final characteristic is their intense focus on the night, their persistent nocturnal engagements. Witches are most dynamically active between midnight and 3 a.m. That interval is their operational zone. I routinely vacated my body through astral projection around this time to participate in meetings or execute assigned tasks. That is why the Bible states in Job 36:20, "Do not long for the night, when people vanish from their places." Midnight is their peak hour, and this is precisely when individuals dedicated to prayer must arise. I once launched an attack on a pastor in Abuja at 2 a.m. He was interceding for spiritual renewal in his congregation. As I left my physical form and infiltrated his room in the spiritual realm, I was met with a barrier of fire enveloping him. The man wasn't even aware of my presence, yet his prayers functioned like missiles. That night, I was unable to get near him, and I retreated wounded. That demonstrates the potency of midnight intercession. On another occasion, I joined other witches in South Africa to assault a group of students engaged in a 7-day fast. We penetrated their dormitory at 3 a.m., but to our profound astonishment, their collective spiritual voices were so resonant that it sounded like thunder. We were unable to breach their defense that night. Many of us faced spiritual judgment in that realm, and some never returned from that specific operation. I have just disclosed 5 unmistakable signs that distinguish witches. Do not remain in ignorance. Be vigilant, maintain a commitment to prayer, and scrutinize every spirit. Always remember that Jesus Christ has already secured our triumph over the forces of darkness. As the book of Colossians chapter 2 verse 15 proclaims, He disarmed the powers and authorities, making a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross.